Hi, know your network, monitor your network with Python. So in this video, we're going to take a look at detecting network changes automatically. Notice we didn't say instantaneously, we say automatically because there's always going to be some kind of lag between an event happening until you're detecting it. Even if you're on the console right away, you still need time for the device to show up, to pop up that event for you to detect and react to it. So at least we could automate the monitoring portion of it. We're also going to look at log management with Python. We're going to look at using Python and how do we integrate that with popular monitoring tools such as Cacti. We're going to look at NetFlow, SFlow-based monitoring, as well as alerting and email notification upon some of the detections. So let's look at how can we detect network changes automatically. So of course, there are two ways that, whenever we need information from the device, there are two ways to do it. We can actively go out and ask for the device for its current state via SNMP API calls, or we could passively consume events coming in from the device, such as your log, such as NetFlow, SFlow, as well as SNMP traps. We're going to look at those two items, the passive parts of it, later on in the section. And in this video, we're just going to look at the active probes using SNMP and API calls. So let's look at the demonstration. In the lab, we're going to have two devices, still a very simple lab, but just two different devices. One is iOS v1 and one is NXOS. We're basically going to use iOS v1 for SNMP portion, and we're going to use the Nexus device for API calls using NX API that we've seen before in the last section. Some of the housekeeping items, the first device is going to be at IP address, the first device being the iOS device is going to be at IP address 172.16.1.78, and with the Nexus device at 79. And we're going to configure just a pretty, best practice. We have a standard access list that's permitting the SNMP queries just from our management station. And we're going to have a community of public, which of course don't do this in production, but for the lab, we're going to use public. And we're going to enable NX API with the feature NX API. And this doesn't show up in the config, but the NX API is listening on port 80 that we configure NX API sandbox that we've already done in the last section. And of course, there are some third-party libraries that is needed to get SNMP to work, and so namely PyASN1 as well as PySNMP. These instructions will be included in the accommodating files for the course, but I'm just listing out here so that you're aware of it. So of course, the first step that you want to do is to make sure your SNMP manager could talk to the SNMP node that you're trying to manage. So here you can see I have an SNMP walk command with a public string, the IP address, as well as the OID. And now that I could see that my SNMP is working through this very simple and the string that I could get back from my iOS device, that now I could take a look at using the SNMP walk to test out the interface status for my iOS device. So as you can see that I have 4 interfaces, and the second one is integer of 1. So if I go down to my iOS, so let's do a show here. I could see that there's gig 0 and there's gig 01. So if I shut down gig 01 and I come back to my query, that you can see that now that becomes 2. So I know that I could query the interface status via this particular OID that is in question. So now we're ready to look at the first script, SNMP script that we're going to utilize. So this is a very simple script that we're just giving it a bunch of OIDs, and we're systematically querying the device through the public string as well as the IP address. And this is just try except. So if we execute this script, that we could see that we could get the 3 MIBs as well as get the interface status. If we wanted to, we could actually shut down the device again, and we're queried again now that we could know that, hey, 2 is the interface status. Awesome. So that was the first testing script. Now this is the real script that we're using. Essentially, we're going to query the interface status for gig 00 and 01, and we're going to put it into a dictionary so that it's more consumable for later on, whether we want to put it into a database or you want to graph it or whatnot. Having the status in a dictionary format is just much easier to consume by our tools. So let's take a look and execute. Awesome. So now that we could see that we have the gig01, and notice because it's a Python dictionary, there's no particular order. But when you consume it, you could just query for the key of hostname, and we also put in the time of query because it's pretty important to know when this result happened. And that's pretty much it for the SNMP query. Pretty straightforward. The key part really just to find the right OR that you want to query, as well as making sure the communication works, as far as the community string and the right IP and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at how do we use the API call to query the device and get the information that we wanted. So I have here a NX API. Basically, it's the same command that we have seen before. We're just using the same URL. This is generated by the bot and using the command show IP interface brief, as you can see on line 20. And the responses will basically be getting back, and I'm going to print out the complete response as well as parsing out the information that we wanted, which is the interface name as well as the interface status. So let's take a look at the results, and that will become a little more clear. So I'm using Python 3 NX API query syntax in order to get the result back. So this is a pretty print version of the result that we got back. As you can see, this is very structured and it's in the dictionary format, and we have the two prefixes and we have the admin status up. And by just parsing those out, you could take a look at the script at your own leisure. But by parsing the script out, we could see that we're able to just query the information that we needed as in a very structured way. So in this video, we just take a look at active probe using SNMP and API calls through to the different devices. Of course, the Nexus device supports SNMP as well. So both tools are useful, and you just need to pick the one that works the best for you. If you already have a management station that and all of your information could be queried through SNMP, you probably just want to stick with SNMP. But if there's some information that doesn't have an OI or just a little more complex, then you may want to use the API call.